All right, thank you for joining me at FutureMoneyTrends.com. I'm here with John Rubino. He's our good friend. He's with DollarClaps.com, a site we check often. And it's not just about the dollar. It's actually about anything macroeconomics, real estate, precious metals, inflation, political stuff. It's the one-stop shop. A lot of people go to Drudge, and I do too. But if you're just looking for the news that really concerns you, that's really relevant, you don't have time to go to a bunch of individual sites, I guarantee you're going to find some great reads on dollarclaps.com. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me on.
John, I invited you on the show to talk about the NSA surveillance, revelations that are coming out from the leaker. But we have to start with precious metals. This video will probably be posted tomorrow, but as of right now, as we're talking, silver has now broken below the $20 mark, and gold has broken below the $13 mark. So I'd kind of just like to get your initial thoughts on, what's going on. I've heard so many people, people that I highly respect, say that, it looks like a bottom is formed. And unfortunately for them, every time they say that, it seems like we just hit with another 6 to 10% move up to the downside.
Yeah, this is brutal, and it's shocking to most of the people in the gold market one way or another because it didn't seem possible a year ago for something like this to happen. But you know what, Daniel, if you go back and look at the chart of 2008, it's almost identical to what's happening now. And so is the macroeconomic environment. At that time, stocks had hit record levels, and the housing market was booming, and everything fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the same thing is beginning to happen now. In the last year, the stock market hit new records in the U.S. and in a lot of other countries, and the housing industry was looking like 2007 again. Southern California housing is making records, and Miami is booming, and a lot of other places that had really been hit hard had come back very, very strongly. We were seeing a big jump in the housing market in general, and this was having the hoped-for effect by the government. The wealth effect is what they wanted to engender by pushing interest rates down, and they were getting it. It looked like the economy was coming back, but you really can't violate the laws of economics forever. You can bend them, but eventually, if you try to have zero interest rates, a growing economy, and a stable currency all at the same time, you find out you can't do it. And so the pressure has to be released somewhere, and interest rates is where it has been released lately. And you see the U.S. long bond getting smacked recently, and the rate on 10 years, for instance, going way up. And that has caused mortgage applications to shrivel up, and it's crushing the stock market. And so we're basically replaying 2008 and 2009. And precious metals got creamed.
Yeah.
But it also set the stage for a huge bull market after that because the government panicked and started flooding the system with cash. They'll try to do the same thing again.
Do you think the precious metals a few weeks ago were actually a leading indicator of what was to come, and what we're seeing right now? Stocks are kind of starting to melt down. Mortgage rates are going up. Obviously, this is going to take effect. Hurt real estate, which we'll probably see in next 2 or 3 months of data. But I mean, do you think the precious metals going down, actually beyond the last 6 weeks, but for the last 2 years, have the precious metals been a leading indicator?
Yeah, well, part of it is that they have this huge run. I mean, 12 straight years up, you need a correction at some point to kind of flush out all the dump money that flows into the top after a long run. And the other thing is that this is, to an extent, a manipulated market.
Mm-hmm.
When physical inventories started to become depleted at the big exchanges, that would have led the exchanges to have to default on futures contracts for gold and silver, and that would have been catastrophic. So you saw a lot of really weirdly timed dumps of $10 billion or $20 billion worth of futures contracts in gold and silver, which forced the price down and kind of broke the momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And interest rates had been going up for a little while, and maybe gold and silver were, like you said, kind of leading indicators of the effects of those interest rates going up, because that would inevitably slow the economy down, inevitably take some of the wind out of the wealth effect of rising stock and housing prices. And gold and silver may have been anticipating those effects. So, yeah, all of that together give you a bear market in precious metals. But it also gives you a panicked government that will react to this with more easy money or big public spending programs or massive tax cuts or some other kind of stimulus, and so it'll set the stage for some other kind of crisis. And my guess would be that it becomes a currency crisis eventually when we just lose faith in paper currencies in general, because it becomes obvious that the governments of the world aren't able to manage their own finances, and that they're actively trying to push down the value of their currencies in order to save themselves. And at that point, that's the best possible environment for gold and silver. So I think from here or from near here, fortunes are going to be made, and you just have to be really brave, and you have to be kind of gutsy to try and call a bottom at this point.
Yeah, the bottom calling it's horrible. It's such a disservice to the whole community. I bought some silver this morning because I saw on MarketWatch.com. It was like, basically the story is, at least according to the mainstream press, that Bernanke is going to reduce his interventionist policies, and so gold's getting smashed, silver's getting smashed, stocks are getting smashed, and I kind of I'm calling Bernanke's bluff. I'm like, I don't think he is, and from what you're saying, you don't believe that either. I mean, for Bernanke just to stop or even reduce, wouldn't deflation just overwhelm the system?
Well, it's really interesting that the global economy is starting to slow down again, even though all the major governments of the world have been pumping out huge amounts of new currency. We're tossing $85 billion a month into the banking system here in the U.S. And in normal circumstances, you would have this raging hyperinflationary boom from something like that. Mm-hmm. And instead, we're seeing the economy kind of roll over a bit, which means that the Austrian economic idea that you really can't get out of a massive debt binge without huge amounts of pain is probably true. You can't borrow more and more money for 30 straight years, as we have done in the U.S., and then expect a few macroeconomic tweaks to save you. There's so much bad debt in the system right now, and that's incredibly deflationary, and we haven't really fixed that. That QE and massive budget deficits, they won't save us. They'll delay the inevitable, but at the cost of ever larger amounts of debt that have to be dealt with in the future. And that's really the reality that we're facing right now, that there is no easy fix.
Yeah.
And when that realization strikes, when people figure out that we really don't have adult supervision, we really don't have this all-powerful government that can save us from our past mistakes, then things get chaotic.
Yeah.
And there's no way to know if this is that time or if that time is 5 years from now. But when it happens, it'll look a lot like this.
Yeah.
And when it begins, it'll look a lot like this, and it'll get much worse from that point.
John, with the NSA surveillance news that's come out recently from this leaker, what do people need to know about? What do people need to know about this? The president, who took an oath to defend and protect the Constitution, is saying no one is listening to our phone calls, no one is tracking my phone or the websites I visit or anything like that. From your research, and you're not only running news articles and stuff out of dollarclaps.com, but you write for a living. From your research, what is the truth? Is the government, should I be concerned? Is the government recording or in any way listening to my phone calls? And do they believe they have the right to do that without a warrant?
They absolutely believe they have the right to do it, and they absolutely are listening to your phone calls, Daniel. There's a growing file on you right now. It's an electronic file, and it's in a server farm where the data is flowing in from phone calls and texts and emails, and they're being stored there with the idea that once you show up on some kind of a screen, when you're on the radar screen because you make a phone call to somebody else who's under surveillance, or you speak out against the government in some way that brings you to their attention, then they'll just go back through the last 2 or 3 years of all of your electronic communications, looking for something to use against you. And they'll find it, or well, probably not with you. You're a pretty squeaky clean guy, from what I can tell. But most people, there's something out there.
I'm squeaky clean when it comes to my family, but I do talk bad about the government a lot. And I just called you, so now I'm probably screwed.
Yeah. This is being listened to.
Yeah.
But the idea is that the government at some point will have the power to go back through your last decade's worth of electronic communications and then use what they find against you if you cross them in some way. And even if the guys in charge today are philosopher princes, really good guys who have our best interest at heart and are using their power wisely, that this power exists means it's going to be misused at some point. When you look at the people that we have elected in the past, without naming names and making anybody mad, there have been a lot of questionable characters that have not just been elected in the U.S. but reelected. There are a lot of people who seek power, and that's the main end that they're chasing, and they tend to win.
Yeah.
They tend to go get elected, and they tend to run things in Washington. And so if you give them an all-powerful government, then you've basically handed them as the phrase goes, a turnkey totalitarian state.
Yeah.
They can switch it on at will and use the IRS or use the NSA or whatever to punish their enemies and reward their friends. And there's nothing we can do about it. And see, we're creating that kind of capability. I'm not saying we're using it extensively now, although there's indications that we are using it. But the time will come when somebody comes into power who is happy to use it, and they'll find those capabilities ready and waiting, and by then it'll be too late. And I'm not sure what the solution is, because even if we insist on them adhering to certain rules, that's just public relations for these guys. They're doing whatever they feel like in the background. And it only comes out when some whistleblower like this guy, Snowden, who they're going to track down and do horrible things to, comes out and says something about it. And so they're going to make an example of him so that nobody else does that, which means they can do anything they want to behind the scenes. And, this isn't a partisan thing. This isn't, Obama's a dictator or George Bush was a would-be dictator or whatever. This is institutional momentum. Whoever's in charge, the same stuff happens. And it doesn't matter whether if John McCain was president instead of Barack Obama, we'd probably be having the same conversation.
Yeah.
Because the guys in charge seem not to be the people we elect, but they seem to be, one layer down or a couple of layers above their national banking system, if you want to put it that way. But what's happening is going to happen no matter who's in charge.
It leads me right into my next question, and the problem I see is there anything we can even do? Because the broad public doesn't care. The Speaker of the House, John Boehner, he recently called the leaker a criminal, someone who had committed treason. So everybody on the top is all in on this. The police state seems to be unstoppable. And I just saw this story right before I called you. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was like a Miss USA pageant, and they asked her, if she cared about people calling, if she cared about the government recording her calls. And by the way, I'm chopping this story up in my recollection, but basically the sum of it was, she basically said that for her safety, she is happy to have the government record her calls because she feels safer. To that, the audience applauded. I mean, is this unstoppable? Are we going to get a police force? I mean, I guess we already have one, but I mean, it's just getting worse and worse. Is it stoppable? Is there anything we can do?
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot we can do, because so much of this stuff is just, it's becoming technologically possible. And for people who can use that technology, it's hard for them to say, well, we could do this, but let's not do it. And no. so there's very little we can do about the course that the country is on right now, because you would think, I mean, based on what Barack Obama said during his first election campaign, that he would have been the guy to stop this in its tracks. But instead, it's accelerated under him. So who are we going to elect who is more likely than him to stop the growth of the surveillance state? And there's really nobody. I mean, Ron Paul's never, 5% of the vote, and that's it. And he's the only guy out there who even sounds like he means it when he talks about this stuff.
What about his son?
Uh, Rand Paul is, he's doing good work out there, but it's doubtful that, first of all, he would ever get elected saying what he says, and second of all, that he would succeed once he's in office in stopping this stuff, which he probably doesn't understand on a technical level, and wouldn't even have to be told about by the guys at the NSA doing it if they don't want him to know about it. So it's hard to see how we stop this process, which means that you're kind of left to your own devices.
Yeah.
You have to do what you can to protect yourself, which means international diversification, trying not to be too dependent on dollar-based assets, and generally trying to be as self-sufficient as possible, so you're just not as vulnerable as somebody who's tied into the financial system in the U.S. so completely that you become vulnerable to your brokerage account just disappearing one day.
Yeah.
Or the IRS auditing you and finding all kinds of stuff that you wish they hadn't seen. You just need to be squeaky clean, and you need to be diversified, and those will not save you if the system really spins out of control, but it's all we can do. It's the best we can do right now.
Scary times. John, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to learn more about John, check out dollarcollapse.com. You can also sign up for his email list and receive at least one article a week. Are you doing one a week, or is it more than one a week, John?
Yeah, one or two a week. The real attraction of dollarcollapse.com is the updated news, I think.
Absolutely.
That's all fed in daily, and it's all covering the stuff that's going on right now.
Thank you so much for your time. You have a great day.
Great. Thanks, Daniel.